They buried my daughter 20 years ago. But 3 nights ago at 3:07 a.m., the hospital called and said she was never dead. I remember the sound of the phone before I picked it up, a sharp metallic ring that cut through the silence like a blade through old wounds. Outside, the wind screamed against the window. Inside, my world froze. A woman's voice came through, trembling. "Mr. Lawson, there's been a development regarding your daughter's case." My throat went dry. My daughter's case? She's been dead for 2 decades. A pause, then barely audible. "We believe there may have been an error." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. My mind jumped back to that coffin, the smell of damp soil, the echo of the priest's voice. I buried her. I held her cold hand. I saw her face. How could there be an error? "Who are you?" I demanded. "What kind of sick joke is this?" But the line cracked, and she whispered only one thing before hanging up. "Please, come in tomorrow. There's something you need to see." I sat there, staring at the dark screen, my heart pounding like gunfire against my ribs. 20 years of silence, 20 years of pretending I could live with it. And now, one phone call ripped it all open again. You want to know what I did next? I grabbed my keys, stepped into the freezing night, and drove through the storm, straight back to the same hospital that once pronounced my little girl dead. And what I found there will make you question what people are willing to bury, to keep their secrets safe. The day we buried her, the snow fell in slow, cruel silence, thick enough to swallow the sound of people crying. She was only 8. Her coffin looked too small to hold a lifetime. I remember standing there, frozen beside that hole in the ground, while the priest mumbled words I didn't hear. My wife, Sarah, didn't make a sound. She just stared at the box, her breath turning to frost until the first shovel of dirt hit the lid. Then something inside her broke. She left 2 months later. No note, no goodbye. Just the sound of the front door closing in the middle of the night. I didn't chase her. I didn't have the strength to lose her twice. After that, the house became a museum of things that no longer mattered. A single pink shoe under the couch, drawings taped to the fridge, the faint smell of baby shampoo that never really left. But I kept one thing close. Her toy horse, the one she never went to sleep without. The paint had chipped off its legs, but the smile was still there. Stubborn like she was. Every year on her birthday, I brought white lilies to her grave. I talked to her like a fool, whispering into the frozen air. "I hope you're warm, sweetheart." For 20 years, I believed I was speaking to the dead. But now, I'm not sure who or what has been listening all this time. The hospital hadn't changed. Same cracked walls, same humming lights that made everything feel sterile and false. 20 years later, I was back where my daughter's death certificate was signed. A young receptionist met me at the door, eyes avoiding mine. "Mr. Lawson, thank you for coming in. The director will see you now." Her voice was practiced, too calm, too careful, like she was reading a script. They led me down a corridor that smelled of bleach and regret. At the end sat a small room, white walls, 1 table, 2 chairs. A folder waited in the center like a loaded gun. Then he walked in, Dr. Harold Mendez, the man who declared my little girl dead. His hair was gray now, hands trembling slightly as he sat. He didn't meet my eyes. "Mr. Lawson," he began, his voice low, "I owe you an apology. There were discrepancies in the records. It seems your daughter's time of death was recorded before all vital signs had ceased." I froze. My knuckles whitened against the table. "Are you telling me," I said slowly, "that she wasn't dead when you buried her?" He swallowed hard. "It's complicated. The administration, there was pressure to close certain cases." I slammed my hand down. Say it. He flinched. She might have still been alive when the certificate was issued. Silence. Just the sound of my breathing and the fluorescent buzz above us. Then came the line that snapped the air in half. We're prepared to offer a formal apology and financial compensation for your distress. I stood up. If she wasn't dead, then where is she? He had no answer. As I left, a security guard brushed past me and slipped a brown envelope into my coat pocket. "Don't trust them," he whispered. "That's the real file." The envelope was old, creased, and smelled faintly of disinfectant. Inside, copies of medical charts, timestamps, signatures that didn't match. But one thing caught my eye, a patient ID marked E21. The name beside it had been blacked out. In the margin, a handwritten note. Cross-ref, Project Seraph, restricted. That night, I sat in my kitchen with nothing but the flicker of the stove light. Every page I turned made my stomach twist tighter. Dates didn't line up. Blood samples relabeled. My daughter's name, Emily Lawson, replaced halfway through the file with that code, E21. The next morning, I drove 3 hours north to a retirement home in Edmonton. I'd tracked down a nurse who used to work the pediatric ICU the night Emily died. She opened the door just enough to see my face. When I said my name, her expression drained of color. "I can't talk about that," she whispered. "You don't understand what they did." "I need the truth." She hesitated, then said the sentence that cracked my world apart. "There was a girl. She woke up after the code was called. They said it was impossible. But she was breathing. They took her away before dawn." I pressed for names. She shook her head. "They'll find me if I say more." Then she closed the door. Back home, I hacked into an old government database, hospital archives wiped clean. But in one forgotten backup folder, I found it, a CCTV still. The image was grainy, time-stamped 20 years ago. A little girl on a metal table, monitors flashing, and her eyes, open, staring right at the camera. I dropped the photo. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. She hadn't died. They'd taken her. I filed a formal request to exhume the body. The hospital said no. "Too much time has passed," they told me. "The remains have legally decomposed." They used words like remains and decomposed to make it sound less human, to make her sound less real. So I did it myself. It was 2 nights after the nurse's confession. Snow fell in sheets, thick and wet, muffling every sound. I parked far from the cemetery gates, headlights off, and carried a shovel through the dark. Each step sank into the frozen ground. Each breath came out white, like ghosts leaving my lungs. When I reached her grave, I didn't pray. I didn't speak. I just started digging. The sound of metal biting soil echoed across the field. Slow, heavy, angry. Hours passed. My arms burned. My fingers bled. But I kept going until the shovel hit something hard. Thud. The coffin. Small, weathered, familiar. I hesitated, then pried the lid open. Inside, nothing. No bones. No cloth. Not even dust. Just emptiness. My throat tore open in a scream I didn't recognize. "Who did you bury here?" The wind answered with silence. Then I saw it. Something folded beneath the coffin's base. A plastic sleeve, half rotted from moisture. Inside, a single sheet of paper. 4 words, written in red ink. "Stop digging." I stood there, snow soaking my coat, staring at that message until my hands stopped shaking. That was the moment I understood. They hadn't just taken my daughter away. They were daring me to find her. And I would, even if I had to dig up every lie this country had ever buried. I found Dr. Harold Mendez on Vancouver Island in a weather-beaten house that leaned into the wind like it had secrets to keep. He lived alone, surrounded by stacks of medical journals and yellowing awards. The kind of man who once saved reputations as easily as he saved lives. When I knocked, he opened the door with a face that knew my name but pretended not to know me. Up close, he looked smaller than in the news clippings, a tired man whose hands still trembled from decades of operating. "I'm here about Emily," I said, and watched his color change. He invited me in, probably thinking an apology would buy him peace. Instead, I sat across from him and hit record on my phone. "I did what I had to," he began, voice flat. "There were orders from administration. We were pressured to close cases, to conserve beds, to prioritize projects." I kept the recorder on. "So you signed a death certificate for a child who might still have been alive?" I asked. He folded his hands, eyes cold. "I saved dozens by reallocating resources. Hard choices were made." "By killing my daughter?" The question came out quiet, but it landed like a fist. He didn't deny it. He offered justification, a world-weary rationalization that was meant to sound noble. I smiled, thin and dangerous. I took photos of the certificates on his mantel, photographed letters, names, signatures. I copied files from an old backup drive I found in a locked drawer. I left with more than evidence. I left with leverage. I wasn't there to burn his house down. I wanted something worse. I planned to feed every truth into the machine that had enabled him, the hospitals, the regulators, the press, and watch the system dismantle him piece by piece. They would strip him of title, funding, and legacy. They would make him small on paper and public record. That would be my justice. I got into the research server late at night, using credentials I'd bought from a man who still owed me a favor. The folders were buried under layers of redaction and code names, but the label Project Seraph was plain as a wound. There it was, a video file named E211interim.move. I hit play with hands that felt like ice. The footage was grainy, shot from a ceiling camera. A child on a stainless table, IV lines like lifelines, and lab techs whispering over screens. Her hair was cropped, a small crescent scar sat above one eyebrow, the same scar I knew as if it were carved into my memory. Monitors beeped. A machine breathed for her. Someone annotated the screen. Neuroregeneration protocol. Trial 3. They injected something clear into a vein. Notes scrolled. Partial synaptic response. Viable tissue. They circled data in green. Potential. They weren't saving a person. They were testing a theory on a child they declared expendable. They kept her alive not for mercy, but for what she could give them. Cells, data, a chance to play God. I paused the video, and the silent face of that little girl stared back at me. I pressed my palm to the screen as if I could warm it. They think they were saving the world, but they killed my heart first. I uploaded everything. Files, footage, invoices, names. The world saw what they did. The hospital's doors closed within a week. Investigations swarmed like vultures. The director's name was dragged across headlines until he couldn't live with it. He took his own life in a locked office, the kind of silence that never brings peace. I went back to the empty plot under a sky that felt too honest. I laid fresh lilies on the soil and whispered, "You're not here, but the truth is." They buried my daughter 20 years ago. Today it was their turn.